I was in a hospital bed, hooked up to machines, wondering if I was going to wake up the next morning. And my parents didn't even know I was there. Correction, they knew. They just didn't care. The last time I called my mother, she said, "We're in Cabo with Rachel, sweetheart. Can it wait?" I was fighting for my life, and they were sipping margaritas by the beach. But when news spread that I'd survived, and inherited nearly $800,000, suddenly they came running, smiling, polished, holding hands like the perfect American family. My name's Olivia Turner. I'm 28 years old and I live in Portland, Oregon. Or at least I used to. I had a quiet life. Graphic designer by trade, coffee addict by nature, mostly kept to myself. I didn't grow up in a bad household exactly. We had a nice home in the suburbs, a golden retriever, weekly BBQs. But even as a child, I always knew I wasn't the favorite. My younger sister Rachel was the one with the big dreams. Cheerleading, homecoming queen, full ride to USC. She sparkled in every way that I didn't. My parents, Mark and Linda, poured everything into her. Money, attention, love. I wasn't mistreated. But I was invisible. They never outright said it, but it was clear. I was the backup daughter. The one you call when Rachel's too busy. After college, I moved out and tried to carve my own space. I didn't ask for help. I didn't expect much. And that worked until last year when I collapsed at work. It started with fatigue and dizzy spells, but I brushed it off as stress. Then came the chest pain, the numbness, and the blackouts. By the time I got to the ER, I could barely speak. They told me it was a rare autoimmune condition, aggressive and unpredictable. I'd need surgery, physical therapy, and long-term treatment. I remember lying in that sterile hospital room, phone in my hand, debating whether to call my mom. I didn't want to, but I was scared. I thought maybe, just maybe, if she knew how serious it was, she'd come. So I called. She answered on the third ring, sounding cheerful. I could hear waves in the background. "Hi, sweetie. We're in Cabo. What's up?" I told her everything. She went quiet for a second, then laughed nervously. "Oh honey, that sounds serious. But we just got here. Can it wait until we're back?" Said sure. Hung up. Didn't call again. Rachel didn't text. My dad didn't check in. Not when I went into surgery. Not when I almost didn't wake up. I spent 3 weeks in that hospital alone. Nurses became my only source of comfort. One of them, Diana, started calling me Sunshine, because I always smiled, even when it hurt. She had no idea I smiled because I didn't know what else to do. And then, somehow, I pulled through. 2 months after I was discharged, I got a call from a lawyer. My aunt, my dad's older sister Margaret, had passed away unexpectedly. She and I weren't close, but she'd visited me once in the hospital. I hadn't known it at the time, but she left her entire estate to me. A house in Lake Tahoe, classic Mustang, and $792,000 in stocks and savings. It didn't take long for my parents to find out. And just like that, they were back. They showed up at my apartment with Rachel in tow. My mom brought flowers. My dad brought wine. Rachel brought that fake smile I hadn't missed. "Liv!" my mom squealed, wrapping me in a hug like she hadn't ignored my near-death experience. "We're so proud of you. Look at you, all grown up." I stood there, stiff, blinking in disbelief. And then Rachel chimed in. "So, I heard about Aunt Maggie. That's amazing. You totally deserve it." I didn't say much. Just nodded, offered them tea, and listened as they danced around the real reason they came. They didn't want me. They wanted my money. I let them sit on my couch like nothing had ever happened. Rachel scrolled through her phone while my mom scanned the room like she was evaluating property value. Dad cleared his throat. "So, have you thought about what you're going to do with it all?" There it was. Less than 10 minutes in. They didn't even ask how my recovery was going. I sipped my tea and shrugged. "Still figuring it out." Rachel smirked. "Well, it's a lot to handle. Might be smart to get help managing it. Like a family trust," Dad cut in smoothly. We've been reading about those. Keeps everything organized. Protects the legacy. I almost laughed. Legacy. They hadn't visited me once in the hospital. Hadn't paid a single bill. And now they wanted to protect the money. But I didn't argue. I let them talk. I listened as they gently suggested we combine resources. How Rachel had student loans, how their mortgage was still a burden. They weren't even subtle. My mom leaned forward, eyes shining. You know, Liv, you've always been the generous one. You helped us out before. And we've always said, if one of us wins, we all win. That was funny. Because when I was gasping for air on a hospital bed, they sure didn't want to all lose. Still I stayed polite. Nodded. Even smiled. But in my head I was somewhere else entirely. After they left that night, I sat in the dark for a long time. My living room smelled like the perfume my mom always wore. Vanilla orchid, artificial and too sweet. I opened a window. There was a sharp ache in my chest that had nothing to do with illness. I kept thinking, why did I expect anything different? Why did some small part of me still hope they'd come back for me? Not the money. The next morning I called the lawyer. I want to set up a will, I said. And a letter. For them to receive after I'm gone. I want it delivered no matter what. He didn't ask questions. Just said he'd get the paperwork started. I spent the next few weeks pretending to play along. When my parents called, I picked up. When Rachel texted, I answered with cheerful emojis. I even agreed to a family dinner at their house. For the first time in years. It was surreal walking into that place again. The same beige walls. The same framed photos of Rachel at every milestone. Cheer camp, graduation, sorority formal. Not a single picture of me past age 16. Dinner was steak. Fancy wine. Forced laughs. My dad made a toast. To family and to new beginnings. My mom beamed like she just welcomed me back into the fold. Rachel tapped her glass with a smug little smirk and said, "You're lucky to have us." Almost choked. But I smiled and raised my glass. To us. What they didn't know was that I had already chosen every word of the letter they'd one day receive. I wrote it late at night, when the house was quiet and my body still ached. It wasn't bitter or angry. It was honest. I described what it felt like to be left alone in a hospital bed, unsure if I'd wake up again. I reminded them that no one called. That no one cared. I wrote about the nurse who held my hand when I cried. Not my mother. I described the moment I got the call about Aunt Margaret's will. And realized, for the first time in my life, someone had truly seen me. I ended the letter with a decision. None of the money would go to them. Not to Rachel. Not to my parents. Instead, every cent would be donated. To a foundation that supports patients recovering without family, without help. The kind of people I had become. I wasn't doing it to punish them. I was doing it so their silence wouldn't win. So my pain would mean something. A month after that dinner, they invited me over again. This time, my mom had brochures laid out on the table. Vacation homes. Investment firms. Even a yacht catalog. Rachel had her laptop open, showing me a spreadsheet labeled, Turner Family Wealth Plan. It was almost impressive. They really thought they'd already won. "We just need your signature to move things forward," my dad said, sliding a folder toward me. I glanced at it, then back at them. "You know what?" said, standing. "I'm still thinking. I'll let you know." Their smiles froze. "But Liv, we've spent so much time." "I know," I said, already walking out the door. "That's the problem." I didn't go back to their house after that. No more fake dinners. No more polite text replies. Just silence. First, they bombarded me with messages. Mom sent long guilt-laced paragraphs. "We just want what's best for you, Liv. Family sticks together. You're being manipulated by outsiders. That lawyer doesn't know your heart like we do." Then came Rachel. She skipped the guilt and went straight to entitlement. "You're seriously going to hoard it all? I always knew you had this weird victim complex. Congrats on your pity money." And then, nothing. No calls. No visits. Just digital silence. But I knew they were watching. I noticed Rachel's fake Instagram accounts checking my stories. I caught my dad's truck circling my block one night, slow and deliberate. I never answered the door. Never called back. I had things to finish. 2 weeks after cutting them off, I finalized everything with my lawyer. Took longer than I thought. Legal language, estate restrictions, notarized forms. It was a maze. But I made sure it was airtight. The will was clear. Upon my death, the money would go directly to the Patient Dignity Fund, a non-profit that helped people survive treatment without families, without homes. The house in Tahoe, donated as a recovery retreat. The Mustang, auctioned off for medical equipment grants. Nothing left for the Turners. I also left instructions for the letter. Not to be emailed. Not to be called in. Printed, signed, and hand-delivered. By someone who wouldn't flinch. My lawyer raised an eyebrow when he read it. "Are you sure this is what you want?" He nodded. "This isn't revenge," I told him. "It's record-keeping." There was only one thing left to do. Disappear, quietly. I didn't mean vanish completely. I just wanted space. So I packed up my apartment, sold what I didn't need, and booked a one-way ticket out of Oregon. I left no note on the door. No post on social media. No forwarding address. The only people who knew where I was going were the bank, the hospital, and the lawyer. I moved to a small coastal town in Maine, Belfast. Quiet. Huggy. Cheap rent. People didn't ask questions here, and I didn't offer answers. Most mornings I walked by the harbor with coffee in hand, watching boats drift through the mist. I liked the cold. I liked the quiet. And I liked that no one here had ever heard of the Turners. 3 months later, I got the call. It was from a local hospital near Portland. My father had suffered a stroke. Mild but enough to land him in recovery. He'd listed me as his emergency contact. After all this time, I didn't say much. Just asked, "Has he regained speech?" The nurse said yes. I told her I wouldn't be coming. Later that day, a text came from my mother. It was a photo of my father lying in a hospital bed, hooked up to monitors. Under it, "Still going to ignore your family now?" I stared at it for a long time. Then I blocked her number. And that's when I knew. They weren't going to stop. Not until they had something in writing. Not until I said the words they wanted, either, "I forgive you," or, "I'll share." But they weren't getting either. Instead they'd get the letter. Eventually. And when they opened it, they'd see themselves. Not the version they presented at barbecues or holiday parties. But the version I saw. The people who stood on the beach with their favorite daughter while I fought for my life in silence. I don't know when that letter will be delivered. Maybe a year from now. Maybe sooner. But I sleep better knowing it exists. It's my last word. Not out of spite. But because the truth deserves to outlive the performance. I started coughing again in late February. It began as a tickle in my throat. Harmless, really. But by the end of the week I was waking up drenched in sweat, short of breath, chest tight like someone was sitting on me. I knew the signs. I'd lived this cycle once before. This wasn't just a cold. It was coming back. The hospital in Belfast was small but efficient. After a scan and 3 vials of blood, the doctor sat across from me with that look. Half pity, half apology. "It's flaring again," she said softly. "You need to prepare for aggressive treatment. You caught it early this time, but it's going to take a toll." He nodded. I didn't cry. What was there to cry about? My body was doing what it always did, fighting me. Back at my apartment, I stared at the ocean from my window. The snow was melting, leaving behind a wet, gray sludge. The harbor was quieter than usual. I thought about how peaceful it was to be sick in silence, without anyone pretending to care. There were no get-well balloons. No fruit baskets with fake cards. And that was exactly how I wanted it. Still, I knew I needed to update things. Just in case. Called my lawyer again. "I want to make sure everything still stands," I said. He confirmed. Yes, the will was secure. Yes, the assets were protected. Yes, the letter was sealed, ready. Then he paused. I have to ask, he said gently. Do you want to revise the message at all? Sometimes people change their minds when, you know. I smiled, though he couldn't see it. No, I said. They haven't changed. Why should I? The worst of the treatment started 2 weeks later. For drips, steroids, mouth sores. I lost weight. My nails went brittle. My skin turned a dull, papery gray. I wore a scarf when I went outside, not for style, but because the cold stung my skin like needles. Every step took effort. Some days I didn't leave the apartment at all. That's when the letters started arriving. Not from them, no. From people I didn't even know. One was from a woman named Julia in Ohio. She said she'd read about the Patient Dignity Fund online. How someone anonymous had donated nearly $1 million to support patients recovering alone. I don't know who you are, she wrote, but I just wanted to say thank you. Your gift gave me a second chance after breast cancer left me homeless. Another was from a man in Detroit who said he'd been rejected by his family after coming out. He got assistance from the fund. Housing, medication, counseling. You made me believe I mattered, he wrote. They didn't know it was me. But their words reached somewhere deeper than any fake apology ever could. By April I was using a cane. By May I was sleeping more than I was awake. And by June I began writing again. Not legal documents, not final letters, just pages for myself. Little truths, like how silence can be a kind of kindness. Or how sometimes, healing doesn't mean fixing the wound. It means not letting it become you. I didn't tell my parents I was sick again. They didn't deserve the update. I knew what they'd do. Show up with sad eyes and greedy hearts, ready to play the role of grieving family. But this wasn't their stage anymore. I had taken myself out of their script. And when the time came, if it came, they would get nothing but that one letter. Just paper. And the truth they spent years pretending didn't exist. By the time July rolled around, I could feel my body slipping. I didn't need a doctor to tell me what I already knew. I could hear it in my breath. Short, uneven, like a match trying to stay lit in a windstorm. I could feel it in my bones, like something ancient inside me was packing its things. I wasn't scared. But I was done pretending I had time. One morning I walked myself to the harbor. It took nearly 30 minutes to go 1 block, my legs trembling with each step. I sat on the same bench I had the day I first moved here. Back when I thought this was just a temporary pause in my life. Turns out it was the final chapter. And weirdly that was okay. The sky was overcast. The water still. I sat for a long time. Thinking. Remembering. Not about my parents. Not about Rachel. About the nurse who held my hand when I was 27 and terrified. About the lawyer who never pushed me to forgive people who never asked for it. About the strangers who wrote me letters and thanked me for simply seeing them. That night I collapsed in my kitchen. The crash must have startled my neighbor, because he found me and called 911. At the hospital I drifted in and out. Machines beeping, nurses moving around me like shadows. No one held my hand this time. But it was fine. I wasn't afraid anymore. 3 days later I passed. Peacefully, the nurses said. Quiet. Without drama. Exactly how I wanted. My lawyer was notified the same morning. He followed the instructions I'd left behind. Called no one but the hospital. Sent no flowers. And then he delivered the envelope that IT arrived on a Monday morning. Mark and Linda Turner had just finished breakfast. Rachel was visiting, coffee in hand, hair in rollers, scrolling her phone like usual. The doorbell rang. Linda opened it to find a courier holding a manila envelope. Delivery from law office of Daniel Kessler, he said. She signed without thinking. The envelope was heavy, tightly sealed. On the front a single line. To be opened together. No exceptions. They sat in the living room. Rachel tore the flap with a manicured nail. Inside was a letter. 4 pages handwritten. And a small card. This is Olivia's final message. Linda began reading aloud. The first few lines were calm, measured. A thank you to the lawyer for honoring her wishes. Then came the part they hadn't expected. If you're reading this, it means I'm gone. And if you're surprised I didn't call, you shouldn't be. Because when I needed you most, you weren't there. Not once. Not even when I almost died. Linda's hands trembled. Rachel leaned forward, frowning. What is this? She whispered. But the letter didn't stop. I watched you celebrate vacations while I counted the days I had left. I called you from a hospital bed, hoping you'd care. You told me to wait until your trip was over. So I did. Waited. I healed. And then I stopped waiting. Mark looked away. Linda kept reading. You didn't come back for me. You came back for the money. You asked about trust funds. You brought wine and fake smiles. You never once said, I'm sorry. So I stopped pretending I was your daughter. And I started acting like a person who mattered. Rachel stood up. This is ridiculous. But Linda kept going, voice cracking now. You will receive nothing. Not the money. Not the house. Not the car. Everything has been given to people who needed what you refused to give me. Presents. Real love. This letter is your inheritance. 4 pages of truth you spent decades avoiding. I don't hate you. I just see you clearly now. Goodbye. Silence. No one spoke for a full minute. Rachel stormed out, slamming the door so hard a photo fell off the wall. Mark sat in his chair, face pale, jaw clenched. Linda folded the letter slowly, like it might break. She stared at it in her lap, not crying, just staring. For the first time they were left with nothing. No control. No version of the story to twist. Only Olivia's words. Unfiltered, undeniable, final. And for once, they had to listen. The letter didn't go viral. It wasn't posted on Facebook. There was no dramatic headline in the local news. But something strange happened. People started talking. It began at the Patient Dignity Fund. They released a quiet statement on their website. In memory of a private donor whose gift changed hundreds of lives. We are naming our newest recovery center the Olivia Turner House. They didn't say how much she gave. They didn't mention her family. Just her name and what it now stood for. Then came the letters. Again. But this time they didn't come to Olivia's apartment. They came to the lawyer's office. To the non-profit. To anyone who might still be holding a piece of her name. One woman wrote, I never met Olivia, but her donation paid for my medication when my insurance denied me. I was ready to give up. She gave me 1 more month with my son. Another said, I'm not just a number in a system anymore. Someone, Olivia, saw me. I hope she knew what she did before she left. The stories kept coming. From cancer patients. From veterans. From people who had been alone for so long, they forgot what dignity felt like. Olivia reminded them. Back in Portland, her parents stayed quiet. Mark returned to work within the month. He stopped talking about Olivia entirely. Linda took down the family photos from the hallway. The ones with Rachel stayed. The ones with Olivia gone. Rachel went back to California, told friends some vague story about money being tied up. She didn't mention the letter. She never would. But that didn't stop people from finding out. Someone at the law firm talked. Maybe a paralegal, maybe a courier. And soon whispers made their way around town. She left them nothing. Not even $1. Good for her. God, that's cold. No, that's power. Olivia had no children, no spouse, no lasting social media presence. But somehow she became a quiet legend. Not for how she died, but for how she chose to leave. Meanwhile, in Belfast, Maine, a bronze plaque was nailed to a white wooden building overlooking the sea. The Olivia Turner House. A place for rest, recovery, and dignity, especially for those who feel forgotten. Inside, patients recovering from chemo walked the same quiet halls Olivia once did. They watched the fog roll in over the harbor. They read the framed quote near the entrance. Sometimes healing isn't fixing the wound. It's refusing to become it. No one knew who wrote it. But they all knew whose life inspired it. Back in her hometown, Her name was barely mentioned at family gatherings. If someone brought her up, Linda would stiffen. Mark would excuse himself. Rachel would change the subject. But the silence didn't erase the truth. It only made it louder. Years passed. One day, a high school student doing a project on unsung women in American history stumbled across an article about the recovery center. She clicked. Read the donor's name. Look deeper. And found pieces of a life. Of a woman who was failed by the people meant to love her, but still found a way to lift others. The student submitted her paper with the title, Inheritance: How Olivia Turner Gave the World What Her Family Wouldn't. It was nearly a year after Olivia's passing when the lawyer unlocked the final envelope. It wasn't addressed to her family, not to the foundation, not even to the hospital that had cared for her. It was addressed to herself. For me when I'm gone. The handwriting was steady, blue ink on heavy paper, folded carefully, as if she wanted it to feel like something permanent, like something left behind with intention. He read it alone in his office, with the blinds drawn and the door closed. And later, with permission, he sent a copy to the board at the Olivia Turner house. They framed it, hung it near the entrance, across from the quote that had already inspired so many. And for the first time the world heard Olivia speak, not to them, but to herself, to the version of me that doesn't exist anymore. You survived more than they know, more than you let on. You smiled through appointments, gritted your teeth through IVs, and kept showing up, even when no one showed up for you. You were never anyone's favorite, never the loudest, never the one who fit into family photos without shrinking yourself. But you were kind, even when it wasn't returned. You were honest, even when it cost you. And you were brave, especially when you chose to stop chasing love from people who only knew how to take. This letter isn't a goodbye. It's a recognition that you mattered, that your quiet pain became someone else's quiet hope. That even though they didn't choose you, you still chose the world. You left more behind than they ever gave. And that is your legacy. Not revenge, not bitterness, but clarity, and choice, and peace. Rest now. You don't need to fight to be seen anymore. You already are. Olivia. Visitors to the center often paused there. Some cried, some smiled, some whispered, "Thank you," without really knowing why. They weren't thanking a millionaire. They weren't honoring a hero with a big stage. They were seeing a woman who had once felt invisible, and chose in the end to make others feel seen. Back in Portland, Olivia's name was still absent from the Turner family tree. Still avoided at dinners. Still treated like a wound too shameful to name. But elsewhere, in letters, in classrooms, on hospital walls and recovery beds, she had become something else. Not just a daughter, not just a patient, but a voice, a mirror, a memory that wouldn't go quietly. And maybe that was the real inheritance. Not money, not property, but a truth so solid it could no longer be buried. These stories hit deeper than drama. They're raw, emotional truths about family, betrayal, and self-worth. Olivia's journey, in particular, left a lasting impression. She wasn't loud or vengeful, but her quiet strength spoke volumes. Being abandoned by the people who should have loved her most, yet still choosing to help others, is both heartbreaking and inspiring. It reminds us that family isn't just blood. It's about presence, care, and integrity. Her final letter wasn't just closure. It was a mirror. For those who've ever felt unseen or unloved, her story offers one powerful message. You matter, and you always did. What do you think about Olivia's story? Share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful, true-to-life family stories coming your way.